Peter is one of the coolest people I've come across. So I was just talking to him backstage, and that's what I told him as well. I love what he has done with DuckDuckGo in the last couple of years as director of product. And believe me, he's someone who has downloaded Google Chrome just for this session, because it goes against his core philosophy to use the Google products. Uh, and he did specifically to come in and speak with you guys today. A lot of business models heavily depend on data of the users, and then targeting them and retargeting them. So how does DuckDuckGo live without it? Is there something more to which meets side?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I will answer the DuckDuckGo part in a second, but to take a step back on that question, as an industry, I think we need to sort of ask ourselves, we being the collective tech industry, why such pervasive data collection is the status quo, and why do companies depend on such data? And ultimately, it's hard to blame the individual developers or publishers who build websites for using platforms or services which enable a lot of this data collection, because the whole system is really incentivized towards data collection. There's not really huge downsides to companies using more data than they probably should. We're starting to see that maybe change. There's a lot of regulation that looks to be coming in various countries. There are lawsuits. There's a lot of stuff happening now, particularly you see that in the EU and the US, that might start to change some of that from a regulatory standpoint, which is good. But you sort of have to ask yourselves, like, why is this the case? And if we're all generally building products to serve people, and you have to ask, what are those people's expectations and norms with respect to privacy? And so I think that's a good way to sort of look at things. So do people expect that if they use your app because you've used some other analytics provider, ad stack or whatever it is, that enables that other company to now also use your data in other contexts? The answer to that is no, and it's hidden today for people, and this is why I think a lot of these companies get away with it. But that is not what people expect, and it's a sort of a gross violation of people's trust to a great degree. And just to give you a few examples of that before I answer the DuckDuckGo part of this, we do a lot of qualitative research at DuckDuckGo, and personally as a product manager, absolutely love qualitative research. By that I mean literally just talking to users, interviewing them. You cannot replace it. I've sat through hundreds of interviews of users around privacy and expectations of privacy, and we usually start interviews, no matter what the exact subject is, with a similar set of questions. We ask people about their online lives, what browsers do they use, what apps do they use, what are their concerns when they go online, and so forth. And today, most people can give elaborate, detailed conversations of how they are convinced that Google and Facebook and other companies are listening to their private conversations through microphones and on their phones. And people will give you elaborate stories of times where it specifically happened. I was talking to my significant other about this thing I've never looked up online, and all of a sudden I saw an ad for this thing. And the reality is that none of that needs to happen. Like, the targeting mechanisms are sufficiently complex that they can get all this information without listening to your microphones. However, it is such that it is the pervasive belief of almost everyone now, and people just are just trusting these companies less and less. And this is important because if you're using the services provided by these companies that people are beginning to trust less and less, that will start to reflect on your app or your service or your business. And people will look for alternatives. Another example here that I personally ran into in the last year, during the pandemic, the price of resale cars in North America skyrocketed. And I was curious to see the trade-in value of my wife's vehicle. And so my local dealership, I didn't really want to go into a dealership. I don't like dealing with salespeople. So my local dealership had an online form. Fill in this form, and we can give you a quote for a trade-in value on your car. I thought that's great. I don't need to go into a dealership. I can fill out this form. I'll get an online quote. Don't need to deal with someone. And I do what most people don't do. I read the privacy policy that was on this form on this website. Seemed okay. It said we highly value your privacy. We don't use your data for other means. Seemed okay. I filled out the form, but I know what it's like out there. So I used a lab that you mentioned earlier, the DuckDuckGo email protection service, and I created an aliased email for this form. And when I fill in forms, I often use a name like Terra Tracker. So I filled in Terra Tracker, some fake email, DuckDuckGo aliased email, because I was worried that they were going to turn around and share that data or sell it. First of all, they didn't give me a quote back, for the purpose of filling in the form, and then 24 hours later, and this has happened for the last year, twice or three times a week, I get predatory loan emails to that email address. Do you need $5,000 extra this week? We have $5,000 waiting for you. Just very predatory sort of loan type of emails. And this is now a reflection of it really impacts my trust with this dealership that I used to do business with. I won't do business with them anymore because they essentially didn't think enough of me as a customer not to use a service that sells my data to a predatory loan company. And so I say all of this because this is important. Like when companies are using marketing efforts, when they rely on a third party who often provides services for free, there is a trade-off. And often that trade-off is the trust of your own customer at the end of the day. So it's an important consideration when you're building a service. But to circle back a lap and answer your question on DuckDuckGo, DuckDuckGo does not use any of these means. We use good old brand marketing. We invest in earned media. If I talk to early DuckDuckGo employees, when there was a handful of people in the company, they went, through a bunch of efforts, reached out to press and media, and tried to get our CEO onto the talk shows, podcasts, whatever, particularly in response to privacy events that happened in the media, and they earned media spots and then garnered attention that way. And of course, we use contextual ads. We will buy ads on platforms where it's not based on any behavioral data. It's based entirely on context. That's exactly how DuckDuckGo search ads work. We don't know anything about users. We don't want to know anything about users. You search for a car, you're going to get car ads. And so that's the approach we take, and it's been very effective for us, and it's very effective for advertisers who advertise ultimately on DuckDuckGo.
As a product manager, how to make sure product decisions by making privacy and security as top priority, but not compromising on other features at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, DuckDuckGo obviously builds for, we're a privacy product. Like that's exactly what we do. It's built into our brand. Like people are choosing us for privacy. So it's pretty obvious that needs to be part of the mix. But yeah, I think when you're building a product generally, from a best practice standpoint, I would say you need to have policies, and that's sort of sexy as that sounds. You need to decide what your principles are, what your policies are going to be, and particularly how you're going to treat data. And that you need to establish that, and then you need to apply it in your decision making. Just as some examples there at DuckDuckGo, we have privacy principles that we share internally. We've set up things called privacy triage, where if you're a marketer at DuckDuckGo and you want to do a new campaign, and you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that lives up to our privacy philosophies, you can go to our privacy triage, where we have privacy engineers who are experts in poking holes in the ways in which that privacy can be violated. They will help reason through whether or not a certain approach makes sense, whether it abides by our philosophy or not. These are the sort of approaches that you as a business need to take and you need to establish, because if you don't, you end up making many small decisions that incrementally may make you worse on privacy each time, until you get to the point where you have a product that users may not trust, or you may put yourself in a position where you're collecting way more data than you need, and then you have a data breach, and then you just decimated the trust in your brand. So it is important to sort of establish those as sort of philosophies.
what how does the user retention work in the product like DuckDuckGo?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's similar to what I said earlier with respect to aggregates. So what do you need to measure user retention? You need to know that someone has showed up. And you can decide on the point of activation or however you want to measure it, but then you need to know that they're still there a week later, a day later, a month later, whatever it is. You can do that without uniquely identifying people. We do that on the client side, meaning we send a pixel from the client, and on the client side, it knows that it's already sent the pixel in that day. And so as long as on the client side you enforce only send one pixel per day, then you can assume that on the server side, if you're getting a hit from a client, that is a unique one. And so we just do it in the aggregates. You can put people into cohorts without uniquely identifying everyone, and then you can see how many people do we have on day one and how many people do we have on day 7 and so forth. So you can do it that way. And as part of that, like, you need to really think it through. When I say you put people into cohorts, we also do calculations to ensure, because those cohorts will get smaller over time, that they never get small, such that you can uniquely identify someone later. We actually will aggregate cohorts later when they get too small. So we have methods in place for that, so that we are never in a position to link anything that comes back from the clients to an individual person.